She's dead. The words tore through the smoke before anyone saw the body. Sergeant Nolan Briggs screamed it from behind a shattered wall of limestone, his voice breaking over the radio as dust rolled down the side of the Afghan ridge. Somewhere above him, machine gun fire cracked against the rocks. Somewhere below, a ranger was calling for a medic. And somewhere in the middle of that chaos, Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss had stopped answering. 30 seconds earlier, she had been alive. She had been on the high shelf above the valley, belly flat against the stone, one eye behind her scope, her rifle steady as a heartbeat. She had been doing what she always did, watching the angles no one else watched, reading the wind no one else felt, counting the spaces between danger and death. Then the ridge exploded. Not one blast. 3. The first hit below her position and threw fire across the slope. The second swallowed the radio relay in a burst of sparks. The third struck close enough that the whole mountain seemed to lift off its bones. For 2 seconds, nobody heard anything. Not the rifles. Not the shouting. Not the rotor wash from the evacuation bird circling too far away to land. Only a ringing silence. Then the radio came alive with panic. Overwatch, check in. No answer. Voss, this is Ranger 6. Check in. Nothing. Briggs crawled toward the last place he had seen her muzzle flash. His gloves slipped in dust and blood. A torn drag bag lay against the rocks. A cracked lens from her spotting scope glittered near his boot. Her rifle was still there, half buried in gravel, its barrel twisted from the blast. And beside it, on the stone, there was blood. Too much blood. Briggs froze. His face changed before his voice did. She's dead, he said. The words moved through the team faster than the smoke. One by one, the Rangers heard it and looked up toward the ridge where the quiet SEAL sniper had been watching over them. The woman they had questioned. The woman they had laughed about in low voices during the flight in. The woman one of them had called too small to carry her own shadow. Now there was no shadow. Only smoke. Only blood. Only the broken rifle on the rocks. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in courage and respect, hit like and subscribe. These stories inspire change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Mara. 6 hours before the ambush, Mara Voss had walked into the forward operations tent without making a sound. That was the first thing the Rangers noticed. Not her rank. Not the SEAL trident on her uniform. Not the faded scar that ran from the corner of her jaw down beneath her collar. Just the silence. She moved like someone who had learned a long time ago that noise got people killed. Her boots didn't slap the floor. Her gear didn't rattle. Even the sling of her rifle sat flat against her body, secured with the kind of care that came from repetition, not inspection. The tent was crowded with maps, radios, ammunition crates, and men who had slept too little and talked too loudly. A heater rattled in the corner, fighting against the cold mountain air. Red light washed over the faces of Alpha Ranger team as they studied satellite images of a narrow valley cut between two ridgelines. Mara stopped near the back. She did not interrupt. She did not introduce herself. She simply listened. Captain Elias Ward, the Ranger team leader, stood over the map table with both hands planted on the edges. At 34, Ward had the look of a man carved by deployment after deployment, lean face, tired eyes, and a voice that could make young soldiers stand straighter without knowing why. Our objective is here, Ward said, tapping a square building marked in grease pencil. Abandoned relay station. Lost contact 48 hours ago. Intelligence package may still be inside. We go in, recover the drives, confirm status of missing personnel, and extract before dark. A young ranger near the front raised his hand. Any word on enemy strength? Unknown, Ward replied. That single word tightened the room. Unknown meant too many things. Unknown meant the drones saw nothing, but the rocks might be full of rifles. Unknown meant the valley looked empty because someone wanted it to look empty. Unknown meant every step forward could be the step that changed a man's life forever. Mara studied the satellite image from where she stood. The valley was too clean. The road bent too sharply near the dry creek bed. The ridge on the east side had 3 natural firing shelves. The abandoned relay station sat in the open like bait. Her eyes paused on the shadow line above the western slope. There. A narrow cut in the rock. Too small for a vehicle. Wide enough for men. She looked at it for 3 seconds, then lowered her gaze. Across the tent, Sergeant Briggs noticed her. He leaned toward the ranger beside him and whispered, not as quietly as he thought, "That's the sniper they sent us?" The other ranger glanced back. Mara was 5'5" at most. Compact. Calm. Her dark hair was tucked tight beneath her cap. No swagger. No hard stare. No need to fill the tent with her presence. To men like Briggs, that looked like weakness. "She looks like she should be teaching map reading," he muttered. A few rangers smirked. Mara heard it. Her expression did not change. Captain Ward did, though. His eyes lifted from the map and moved slowly toward Briggs. "That sniper," Ward said, "is attached to us for Overwatch." Briggs straightened. "Yes, sir." But the damage had already been done. The room had taken her measure in a glance, and most of them had measured wrong. Mara stepped closer to the table. "Captain," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the tent settled around it. Ward looked at her. "Chief Voss." She pointed to the western ridge. "That cut in the rock. Has anyone cleared it?" The intelligence officer frowned and leaned over the image. "Drone sweep didn't show movement." "That wasn't my question," Mara said. The room went still. Not because she was loud. Because she wasn't. Ward studied the image again. "No. It has not been physically cleared." Mara nodded once. "Then assume it's occupied." Briggs exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "With respect, Chief, if the drone didn't catch anything, maybe there's nothing there." Mara turned her head slightly. Her eyes landed on him, not sharp, not angry, just steady. "Drones see heat," she said. "They don't see patience." No one laughed after that. But Briggs looked away with the kind of smile men use when pride has been touched in front of witnesses. Mara returned her attention to the map. She knew that smile. She had seen it in training rooms, on flight decks, inside briefing tents, and across more firing lines than she cared to remember. It was the smile of someone who thought respect was automatic for him and optional for her. She said nothing else. Outside, the first gray light of dawn spread over the mountains. Inside, the Rangers prepared for a mission they believed would test their speed, discipline, and courage. None of them knew it would also test their judgment. And before the sun dropped behind those ridges, the woman they doubted would be left for dead on a mountain. Then she would come back carrying the men who had abandoned her. Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss had learned early that the most dangerous people were rarely the loudest ones in the room. Loud men wanted witnesses. Dangerous ones wanted angles, timing, and silence. Mara had built her career in silence. She was 32 years old, though most people guessed younger until they looked directly into her eyes. There was something there that made them correct themselves without speaking. Not hardness exactly. Not coldness. Something quieter than both. The stillness of a person who had seen panic up close and decided never to give it a home inside her body. Her file was thin where it should have been thick. Dates. Assignments. Training certifications. Clearance levels. The kind of official language that told the truth while hiding everything important. Advanced reconnaissance. Long-range interdiction. Joint Special Operations Support. 3 commendations with the details redacted. 2 injuries marked as non-training related. 1 field promotion after an operation no one in the Ranger tent was cleared to read. To most of Alpha Team, she was just the attached sniper. A quiet SEAL with a rifle case, narrow shoulders, and no interest in proving herself during breakfast conversation. That made her easy to misunderstand. During the gear check, the Rangers worked in a loose circle outside the operations tent. Rifles were inspected. Magazines were seated and pulled, then seated again. Radios were tested in clipped voices. Medical kits were strapped down. Someone passed around instant coffee that tasted like burnt metal and bad decisions. Mara knelt beside her drag bag and laid out her equipment with deliberate care. Rangefinder. Wind meter. Spare batteries. Tourniquets. Chest seals. Signal mirror. A folded strip of orange panel marker. 2 protein bars she would probably forget to eat. She checked each item once, then checked it again for the version of herself that might be tired, bleeding, or crawling through dust later. Across from her, Sergeant Briggs watched with open amusement. He was broad-shouldered, strong, and young enough to believe strength was the same thing as readiness. His uniform was squared away, his weapon spotless, his confidence louder than both. He had done hard training and survived enough missions to be respected by the newer Rangers. But not enough to know what he did not know. "You always pack like you're moving in?" he asked. Mara did not look up. "Only when I plan on coming back." A ranger named Cole laughed under his breath. Briggs smiled. "That's cute." Mara zipped a side pouch and checked the sling on her rifle. The weapon was not flashy. No polished parts. No personal markings except a small strip of worn tape near the stock. It looked used, trusted, and cared for. The kind of rifle that had spent more nights outside than in an armory. Briggs stepped closer. "So, what's your longest shot, Chief?" There it was. The question that was never really a question. Mara had heard it from young officers, bored Marines, foreign commandos, and men at gun ranges who wanted numbers more than truth. They did not ask because they wanted to learn. They asked because they wanted a measurement they could challenge. She secured the rifle case. "Far enough," she said. Briggs looked at the others and chuckled. "Far enough. That's convenient." Mara stood. She was not tall. Next to Briggs, she looked almost slight. But there was no shrinking in her posture. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her breathing stayed even. Her hands hung loose at her sides, not clenched, not defensive. That bothered him more than anger would have. People who got angry could be pulled into a fight. People who stayed calm forced you to stand alone with your own foolishness. Captain Ward came out of the tent before Briggs could say more. "Mount up in 5, Ward called. Check comms. Keep it tight. We move fast and quiet." The team broke into motion. Mara lifted her pack and slid into the flow without asking where to stand. She chose the rear left side of the formation, not because anyone assigned it to her, but because it gave her the best view of the ridgeline, the vehicles, the team spacing, and the faces of the men she might have to save. Private First Class Evan Holt noticed. He was the youngest ranger on the team, barely 21, with a fresh scar over one eyebrow and the nervous focus of someone trying not to make a mistake. Unlike Briggs, Holt watched more than he spoke. As they walked toward the vehicles, he drifted near Mara. "Chief," he said quietly, "you really think that western cut is a problem?" Mara glanced at him. He was not mocking her. That mattered. "I think empty places don't always mean safe places," she said. Holt nodded, absorbing it. Drone footage looked clean. "Clean is a shape," Mara replied. "Safe is a pattern. Learn the difference." He looked toward the mountains beyond the wire. The dawn had turned them blue and silver. Beautiful, if you did not know better. The kind of landscape that made young soldiers forget that beauty could hide muzzle flashes. "My first deployment," Holt admitted. Mara already knew. It was in the way he touched his gear too often, checking straps that were already tight. It was in the way his eyes kept moving, not yet trained enough to know what mattered and what was only fear trying to look useful. She said, "Stay behind Ward when we enter the valley. Don't silhouette yourself against the road. If you hear me say down, don't look around. Just drop." Holt swallowed. "Yes, Chief." Briggs heard the exchange as he climbed into the lead vehicle. "Careful, Holt," he called. "Spend too much time with Overwatch, and she'll have you scared of shadows." A few men laughed again. Holt's face reddened. Mara only looked at Briggs for half a second. Then she climbed into the second vehicle and sat by the open side, facing outward. The convoy rolled through the gate just as the sun touched the top of the ridge. Inside the vehicle, metal vibrated beneath Mara's boots. Dust lifted behind the tires. The base faded into the distance, replaced by broken road, dry creek beds, and the wide silence of hostile ground. The Rangers talked less once they left the wire. That was always when truth began. Not in briefings. Not during jokes. Not in the clean geometry of maps. Truth lived outside the wire, where the land did not care about rank, pride, gender, or reputation. Out there, the mountain only asked one question. Can you survive what you failed to respect? Mara watched the ridges. She counted windows in abandoned compounds. She tracked birds lifting suddenly from scrub brush. She felt the wind shift against her cheek and knew it would push a bullet left past 600 meters. Her mind went quiet in the old familiar way. Behind her, Briggs was still talking to Cole through the headset, trying to sound relaxed. Just saying, Briggs muttered, I've seen plenty of specialists come and go. They send someone with a fancy tab. Everyone acts like they're magic. Then the shooting starts, and it's just us carrying the weight. Mara heard every word. She did not answer. Because the mission had already started. Because the valley was getting closer. Because somewhere ahead, in a dark cut between rocks, patients might already be waiting with a rifle. And Mara Voss had no interest in winning an argument when she could be reading the wind. The road into the valley narrowed until the vehicles could no longer move side by side. That was the first bad sign. Mara felt it before anyone said it. The change in spacing. The forced compression. The way the mountains leaned inward until the convoy became a single line of metal, men, and exposed decisions. The lead vehicle slowed near a dry creek bed. Loose stones clicked beneath the tires. Dust rose in low sheets behind them, drifting across the road and hanging there because the morning wind had weakened. Above, the ridges stayed still. Too still. Mara shifted slightly in her seat and studied. The western slope. There were no obvious fighters. No muzzle flashes. No movement along the high shelves. No glint from optics. No sudden birds leaving the rocks. That was the second bad sign. Real emptiness had life in it. This valley had none. Captain Ward's voice came through the headset. 2 minutes to dismount point. Stay sharp. Briggs answered first. Copy. Still quiet. Mara kept watching the ridge. Quiet was not the same as safe. The relay station came into view as the convoy rounded a bend. It sat on a flat patch of ground ahead, a squat concrete structure with a collapsed antenna tower leaning against one side. The walls were sun-bleached and scarred by weather. A chain-link fence hung open at the entrance, swinging slightly though there was almost no wind. Mara's eyes narrowed. The gate should not have moved like that. Not with the air so dead. She touched her radio. Ranger 6, this is Overwatch. Hold short. There was a pause. Ward replied, say again. Hold short. Fence movement at the objective. Possible recent contact. In the lead vehicle, Briggs turned and looked back at her through the dusty windshield. Even from 50 meters away, she could read the shape of his expression. Here we go. Ward lifted his binoculars. I don't see movement. Neither do I, Mara said. That's why I don't like it. Briggs cut in before Ward could answer. Chief, with respect, we're not calling a full halt because a fence moved. Mara's eyes stayed on the relay station. I didn't ask for a full halt. I asked you not to drive into a picture someone framed for you. The headset went quiet. A few rangers glanced at each other. Briggs gave a short laugh. A picture. Ward's voice hardened. Briggs, keep the channel clear. Yes, sir. But the irritation had already entered the team. Mara could feel it moving through them like cold water under a door. Men who had been tense now had somewhere to put their discomfort. Not on the valley. Not on the unknown. On her. That was easier. Blame the warning. Not the risk. The convoy stopped behind a natural rise about 300 meters from the relay station. The rangers dismounted in disciplined silence, weapons up, bodies low. Ward signaled the team into 2 elements. Briggs took the left side with Cole and Holt. The second element moved right, using broken stones and scrub brush for cover. Mara climbed out last. She did not rush. Her boots touched the dirt. Her rifle came free. Her eyes went up. Always up. The western ridge had the cut she had marked during the briefing. From the road, it looked like nothing more than a shadow in the stone. From this angle, it was worse. Deep enough to hide men. High enough to dominate the valley. Close enough to trap the team between the station and the creek bed if fire came from both sides. She moved to Ward's position and crouched beside him. I want the high shelf, she said. Ward looked toward the ridge. You can reach it? Yes. Alone. Mara glanced at him. That's usually how Overwatch works. Ward almost smiled, but the moment was too heavy for it. Briggs heard from a few steps away. "Sir, with all due respect, sending one shooter up there alone is a waste. We need bodies on the objective." Mara looked at him now. Fully. Not angry. Not offended. Just present. Briggs met her stare for a second, then looked back at Ward. "She's attached to us," Briggs continued. "But this is a Ranger recovery. We don't need a separate agenda." Mara said nothing. The words landed exactly as he intended them to. She was extra. She was outside. She was not one of them. Ward's jaw flexed. "Chief Boss is Overwatch." She goes high. "You keep your element moving." Briggs nodded, but his mouth tightened. "Roger that." As the team prepared to move, Holt passed close to Mara. "You still think it's a trap?" he whispered. Mara checked the slope, then the station, then the road behind them. "I think someone wants us to ask that question too late." Holt's throat moved. He wanted to say more, but Briggs called him forward. The young ranger moved. Mara watched him go, then started climbing. The ridge was steeper than it looked from the map. Loose shale slid under her boots. Thorns caught at her sleeves. The sun had begun to warm the rock, releasing the dusty mineral smell of dry earth. Every few meters, she paused, not because she was tired, but because movement without. Listening was just noise. Below, the rangers advanced toward the relay station. They looked small from above. Not weak. Just small. That was something people forgot in uniform. A team could be trained, armed, briefed, and brave, and still be small beneath a mountain that had been waiting longer than any of them had been alive. Mara reached the first shelf and lowered herself behind a long slab of stone. From there, she had a clean view of the relay station, the road, the creek bed, and half of the western cut. Not enough. She moved higher. The second shelf gave her what she needed. A narrow shooting lane across the valley. A view into the shadowed rock. A partial angle on the station's south wall. She settled into position, unfolded her bipod, and brought the rifle into her shoulder. The world narrowed. Breath. Glass. Stone. Distance. Wind. Through the scope, the relay station sharpened into pieces. Broken window. Bent antenna. Dust on the threshold. Boot print near the doorway. Mara stopped. The print was fresh. Not old wind-shaped damage. Not animal track. A human boot, angled outward from the station as if someone had stepped back while carrying weight. She keyed her radio. Ranger 6. Fresh sign at the entrance. Recommend slow approach. Check threshold for wires. Ward answered at once. Copy. Briggs' voice followed, lower but still audible. Or maybe people walked there before the place went dark. Mara moved her scope from the doorway to the fence. Then to the creek bed. Then back to the cut. A flicker. Not movement. A change in darkness. Her finger rested outside the trigger guard. She slowed her breathing. There. Inside the western cut, something shifted again. A piece of cloth the color of stone. A shape too straight to be natural. The faint outline of a rifle barrel withdrawn too quickly into shadow. Mara's voice came through the net like a blade laid flat on a table. Contact likely. Western ridge. Hold position. Below, Briggs turned sharply toward her location. Likely, he snapped. Do you have eyes or not? Mara watched the shadow. 1 second. 2. 3. The barrel appeared again. This time she saw the hand behind it. Yes, she said. I have eyes. Ward raised a fist, stopping the team. For a heartbeat, the valley held its breath. Then a single shot cracked from the western cut and struck the dirt 6 inches from Holt's boot. The young ranger dropped hard, exactly as Mara had told him to. The mountain opened fire. The first burst cut across the valley like someone dragging fire through the air. Rock shattered behind Holt. Chips of limestone snapped against his helmet and shoulders as he hit the ground, both hands locked around his rifle. For one frozen second, he did not move. His eyes were wide, staring at the dust where the bullet had struck 6 inches from his boot. Then Mara's voice came through his headset. Crawl left. Now. Holt moved. Not because he understood where the next shot would come from. Not because he felt brave. He moved because her voice had no panic in it, and in that moment, calm sounded more trustworthy than fear. A second shot cracked from the western cut. It missed the back of his leg by less than a foot. Ward dropped behind a boulder and shouted into the radio. "Contact Western Ridge. Alpha Team, find cover." The valley erupted. Gunfire came from the ridge first, then from the relay station, then from somewhere near the dry creek bed behind them. 3 angles. Coordinated. Patient. Whoever had built the ambush had waited until the Rangers were stretched between the road and the objective with nowhere clean to fall back. Mara had been right. And nobody had time to say it. Briggs threw himself behind a low wall of stone beside Cole. "Return fire. Western Ridge." Cole raised his rifle and fired toward the shadowed cut, but his rounds sparked uselessly against rock. He had no angle. None of them did. The enemy position was too high, too narrow, too well protected. Mara did. From her shelf above the valley, she saw the battlefield as lines and windows. Briggs pinned below. Ward isolated near the center. Holt crawling into a shallow depression. 2 Rangers on the right trapped behind a broken concrete barrier. Muzzle flash inside the western cut. Shooter 1. She exhaled halfway. The rifle settled. Her first round struck the edge of the cut, sending stone fragments into the hidden position. The enemy rifle disappeared. Not a kill. A denial. Good enough for 3 seconds. "Move your right element 10 meters back," Mara said. "Smoke the creek bed." Ward did not question her this time. "Smoke out," he ordered. A Ranger popped a canister. White smoke rolled across the dry creek bed, thick and fast, cutting off the fire coming from behind them. The team shifted backward in pieces, dragging gear, slipping in gravel, firing only when they could see something worth hitting. Briggs glanced up toward Mara's ridge. For the first time since morning, there was no smirk on his face. There was only realization. She had seen it before them. All of it. Another burst hammered the stone above Ward, forcing him flat. A round punched through his radio antenna, snapping it in half. He cursed and rolled behind cover. Mara adjusted her scope. The relay station's south window flashed. Shooter 2. She could not see his full body, only the rhythm of his rifle appearing between 2 broken chunks of concrete. He was disciplined. Short bursts. Change position. Short burst. Change again. Mara waited. A lesser shooter would chase movement. Mara watched pattern. There. The rifle returned to the same broken edge, a fraction too confident. She fired. The window went dark. Below, Ward heard the shot and then the sudden absence of fire from the station. "Nice hit," he said into the net. Mara had already moved on. Not clear. More inside. Briggs heard her and looked toward the relay station with anger tightening his jaw. Not anger at her now. Anger at himself. At the valley. At the fact that pride had made a warning sound like an insult. Holt crawled into cover behind him, breathing hard. "You good?" Briggs asked. Holt nodded too fast. Yeah, I'm good. You'd be dead if you didn't drop." Holt looked up toward the ridge. "I know." The next explosion came from beneath the road. A berry charge detonated behind the Rangers' original position, throwing dirt and smoke 30 feet into the air. The blast flipped a section of broken fencing and slammed it down across the path they had used to approach. If they had ignored Mara's warning and moved faster, half the team would have been standing directly over it. The sound rolled through the valley and came back from the cliffs like thunder. For 2 seconds, even the enemy fire paused. Ward stared at the crater. Then he looked up toward Mara's shelf. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Mara shifted her position, pushing dust away from her cheek with the back of her glove. The blast had revealed the ambush design clearly now. Funnel the team toward the station. Pin them from the west. Cut retreat from the creek. Trigger the road charge when they clustered in the kill zone. Clean. Cruel. Professional. She scanned the ridges again and felt the back of her neck tighten. Something was missing. Too much fire from 3 sides, but not enough movement. No rush. No attempt to close. No shouting. No waste. The enemy was not trying to overwhelm them yet. They were holding them in place. waiting for something else. Mara pulled back from the scope and looked higher along the ridgeline. The sun had climbed behind the eastern side, casting hard light into places that had been shadow earlier. A thin dark shape sat above the valley, almost invisible against the stone. Not a man. Not a rifle team. A launcher. Her radio clicked. Ranger 6, I have possible rocket team high east. They're setting up on your extraction route. Ward's voice came back tight. Can you engage? Mara measured the angle. Bad wind. Partial cover. Long distance. Small target. No time. Yes. She shifted the rifle, but the rock beneath her left elbow crumbled slightly. Her sight picture jumped. She steadied, breathed, and searched again. The rocket team was moving fast now. 2 men. One carrying the tube, one kneeling to assist. They knew they had seconds before someone spotted them, but they also knew a hit on the extraction bird or the convoy would turn the valley into a grave. Mara slowed everything down. The gunfire below faded into distance. The smoke became weather. The shouting became rhythm. She saw the assistant's hand rise. She saw the launcher tilt. She saw the wind push dust across the ridge from right to left. She adjusted. Not much. Enough. Her shot cracked across the valley. The round struck the rock beside the rocket team, exploding dust into their faces. The assistant fell back. The man with the launcher flinched and dropped his aim low. The rocket fired wild, streaking across the valley and slamming into the hillside far behind the Rangers. The explosion shook the ground. Briggs ducked as heat washed over his back. Was that meant for us? Cole shouted. Mara's voice came through, flat and controlled. Yes. No one laughed. No one questioned the word. Ward wiped dust from his mouth and looked over his team. We need to break contact. Move back to phase line Bravo. Mara scanned the valley floor. Negative, she said. Ward froze. Say again. Bravo is covered. They want you there. Briggs clenched his teeth. Then where do we go? Mara looked beyond the relay station, past the broken antenna, toward a narrow drainage ditch running behind the structure. It was ugly. Exposed for 8 meters. Choked with rock. But it cut under the ridge and out of the main fire lanes. The station, she said. Push through it. Exit rear drainage. Briggs stared at the building that had been shooting at them minutes before. That's insane. Mara found another flicker in the western cut. Shooter 1 had returned. She settled her crosshairs. No, she said. It's unexpected. She fired again. This time the western cut stayed silent. Ward made the decision in less than a second. Alpha team on me. We pushed through the station. The Rangers moved. One by one, they broke from cover and crossed open ground under Mara's watch. She fired only when necessary. 1 round to stop a muzzle flash. 1 round to break a window. 1 round into stone close enough to make a hidden shooter choose survival over aim. She was not winning the battle. She was buying seconds. And seconds were the only currency that mattered. Holt was the last to move. He sprinted low, boots sliding in dust, breath ragged inside his headset. Halfway across, he stumbled. His knee hit hard. His rifle skidded away. From the creek bed, an enemy fighter rose through the thinning smoke. Briggs saw him. Ward saw him. Neither had a clean shot. Mara did. But Holt was in the line. She shifted half an inch right, waited for Holt's shoulder to drop, and fired. The enemy fighter disappeared behind the smoke. Holt scrambled up and made it through the station doorway as rounds chipped the ground behind him. Inside the relay station, the Rangers regrouped in darkness and dust, breathing hard, eyes wide, adrenaline shaking through their hands. Briggs grabbed Holt by the vest and pulled him fully behind cover. You hit. No, Holt gasped. Briggs looked toward the ridge again. This time, when he spoke, his voice was different. Chief Voss, he said into the radio. Holt made it. Thanks. For a moment, there was only static. Then Mara answered. Don't thank me yet. She had seen movement behind them. More than one. A second enemy element was climbing toward her shelf, using the smoke and the chaos to close the distance. Mara looked down at the Rangers inside the station. Then at the men coming for her. then at the ridge line that still held the only view of the valley. She knew what came next. If she left her position, the Rangers would lose their eyes. If she stayed, she would be cut off. Mara checked her magazine, chambered the next round, and settled back behind the rifle. Below her, the team pushed toward the rear drainage ditch. Above her, boots scraped against stone. And for the first time that morning, Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss was alone. The drainage ditch behind the relay station was not an escape route. It was a wound in the earth. Narrow, jagged, half-choked with broken stone and rusted sections of antenna cable. It ran from the back of the station toward the lower ridge, where a dry wash disappeared between two leaning walls of rock. On the satellite image, it had looked like nothing. A shallow line. A possible path. From inside the valley, under fire, it looked like the only chance they had. Captain Ward led the first two Rangers through the rear breach in the wall. Cole followed, then Holt, then Briggs, who kept turning back toward the station's shattered windows as if expecting the darkness to reach out and grab him. Rounds struck the concrete above them. Dust poured down in sheets. "Move," Ward shouted. "Keep moving." The Rangers dropped into the ditch one by one. Boots scraped. Knees hit rock. Gear snagged on wire. Nobody complained. Pain had become background noise now, just another sound beneath the rifle fire and the hard breathing inside their headsets. Above them, Mara's rifle cracked again from the ridge. One shot. Then another. Each report came with enough spacing to tell Ward she was not panicking. She was choosing. Measuring. Spending ammunition like she might need every round for a long night. Ward keyed his broken backup radio. "Overwatch. Alpha is in the drainage. Status." Static answered first. Then Mara. "Still with you." Her voice was calm, but thinner now. Closer to the edge of effort. Briggs heard it. He looked up toward the ridge but could not see her. The smoke had thickened, crawling over the valley and wrapping the shelves in dirty white layers. Somewhere above that veil, Chief Voss was alone with the men who had climbed after her. Briggs swallowed. "Captain," he said, "we've got to pull her down." Ward kept moving. "She knows the route." "That's not what I mean." A burst of fire tore into the ditch ahead. Ward shoved Holt down by the shoulder just as rounds snapped across the space where his head had been. "Contact front," Cole yelled. The ditch had become a trap of its own. Two enemy fighters appeared near the mouth of the wash, using the rocks as cover. Ward fired twice, forcing them back. Cole added a burst. Briggs dragged Holt behind a fallen slab and pressed him down. The young ranger was breathing too fast. "I'm good," Holt said, though nobody had asked. Blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow, dark against the dust on his face. Briggs looked at it and felt something cold move through his chest. Minutes earlier, he had thought the mission was about recovering drives and proving the team could handle its own problems. Now the valley had stripped that foolishness down to bone. This was not about pride. It was about who walked out. Mara's voice cut into the net. "Two at the wash mouth. Left fighter has the angle. Don't rise." Ward looked up, eyes searching through smoke. "You have a shot?" "Partial. Take it if you can." A pause. Then Mara said, "Wait." That single word froze them. Briggs held Holt down. Cole stopped shifting for a better view. Ward pressed his cheek into the dirt and trusted a woman he had known for less than a day with the next breath of his team. Above the valley, Mara shifted behind her rifle. The enemy element climbing toward her had reached the lower edge of her shelf. She could hear them now. Small sounds. Stone under boots. Metal brushing rock. A whispered command in a language she understood well enough to know they thought she was alone and wounded. They were half right. A piece of shrapnel had cut through her left side during the third blast. Not deep enough to kill quickly. Deep enough to make every breath come with heat. Blood had soaked into the lower edge of her vest and was beginning to stiffen her uniform. Her right ear still rang from the explosion. Her left hand trembled if she let it relax. So she did not let it relax. Through the scope, she watched the wash mouth below. One fighter leaned out too far, tracking the ditch with his rifle. Behind him, the second man prepared to move across the opening. Mara waited until their bodies overlapped. One round. The first fighter dropped out of sight. The second stumbled backward, hit by stone fragments or fear. Either was useful. Move, Mara said. Ward moved first. The Rangers surged down the ditch, crossing the exposed section before the enemy could recover. Briggs pulled Holt by the back of his vest. Cole covered right. Another Ranger, Mason, covered left, firing controlled bursts into the smoke. They made 15 meters. Then the mountain struck again. The blast came from the ridge behind the station, lower than Mara's shelf, closer than the first explosions. A pressure wave slammed into the drainage ditch and lifted dust from every crack in the ground. Cole was thrown sideways into the rock wall. Mason disappeared behind a burst of dirt and shattered concrete. Holt screamed once. Not in fear. In warning. Briggs. Briggs turned just in time to see a chunk of antenna tower sliding down from above, shaken loose by the blast. He shoved Holt away. The metal struck the ditch between them with a sound like a church bell being broken in half. For a moment, nobody could see. Dust filled the world. Ward coughed, rolled to one knee, and shouted names. Cole. A groan. Holt. Here. Briggs. Up. Mason. No answer. Ward's face changed. Mason. Still nothing. Through the dust, they found him pinned under a section of concrete and twisted fencing near the wall of the ditch. His leg was trapped. His rifle was gone. Blood darkened the ground beneath him. Cole crawled over with one arm hanging wrong at his side. I've got him, Cole said, though he clearly did not. Ward grabbed the concrete and pulled. It did not move. Briggs joined him. Holt pushed too, jaw clenched, face pale. The slab shifted an inch, then settled again. Mason made a sound through his teeth. Ward looked toward the wash. More movement. More rifles. The enemy had heard the blast and knew the Rangers were stalled. We can't stay here, Cole said. Nobody answered. Because the truth was already there, standing among them. They could not lift the slab fast enough. They could not carry Mason and fight through the wash. They could not call the bird into that fire. And above them, Mara was running out of time. Ward keyed his radio. Overwatch, we have one pinned. Need 30 seconds. Mara heard him while turning her rifle toward the men climbing onto her shelf. The first fighter appeared over the edge 10 meters away. Too close for the scope. Mara rolled left as his rifle came up. The round struck the stone where her head had been. She came up on one knee, drew her sidearm, and fired twice. The fighter dropped back behind the rocks. Another climbed from the right. Mara pivoted, but pain tore through her side and stole half her breath. The second man rushed her position. She caught his wrist, redirected the weapon down, and drove her knee into his center mass. Not graceful. Not clean. Survival rarely was. He stumbled. She struck him again with the pistol grip and shoved him off balance into the shale. More boots below. More voices. She holstered the sidearm with fingers slick from blood and got back to the rifle. 30 seconds, she said into the radio. Briggs heard the strain this time. Everyone did. He looked up, but the smoke hit her. Chief, he said. How many are on? You. Mara settled behind the rifle and found the wash again. Enough. Then she fired. The shot cracked over them, and an enemy fighter at the wash mouth vanished behind the rocks. Ward, Briggs, and Holt pulled at the slab again. Cole used his good arm to dig under Mason's trapped leg. Mason groaned, trying not to scream. Again. Ward shouted. They pulled. The slab shifted. Mason's leg came free. Briggs grabbed him under the arms. Holt took his gear. Cole staggered forward to cover them, firing with one hand braced against the ditch wall. Then Ward's radio filled with a sound none of them wanted to hear. Mara's rifle fired once more. Then silence. Not pause. Silence. Ward stopped moving. Overwatch, report. Static. Boss, report. Nothing. Briggs stared up at the ridge. A dark shape tumbled from Mara's shelf through the smoke and struck the rocks below. It was too far to identify at first. Then the wind shifted, and they saw the drag bag. Torn open. Empty. Holt whispered no. Ward tried again. Mara, check in. The only answer was gunfire from the ridge, now uncontrolled, angry, sweeping the shelf where she had been. Briggs' face went gray beneath the dust. He remembered the jokes, the smirk, the way he had called her extra. A final explosion struck the high shelf. Flame flashed through the smoke. Stone broke loose and poured down the ridge in a deadly stream. Ward raised his arm to shield his face. Briggs stared into the fire until his eyes watered. And then he said the words that would follow him for the rest of his life. "She's dead." Ward did not respond. He looked at the trapped men, the wounded, the closing wash, the dying radio, the ridge no one could climb under fire. Command was sometimes choosing which part of your soul to leave behind. "Move," he said, voice broken low. "We move now." Briggs did not move at first. Ward grabbed his vest. "Sergeant." "Now." The Rangers pulled Mason into the wash. Cole limped behind them. Holt looked back again and again toward the burning ridge. No one saw Mara. No one heard her. No one knew that 30 meters below the shelf, hidden behind a split in the rock, Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss lay on her back with blood. In her mouth, one hand still locked around her radio. Her headset was dead. Her rifle was gone. The team was leaving. And 4 Rangers were still somewhere in the valley, cut off behind the smoke. Mara opened her eyes. Slowly. Then she rolled onto her side and began to crawl. Mara crawled because standing was not an option yet. The world had become a narrow strip of stone in front of her face. Dust. Blood. Rock. Breath. She moved one elbow at a time, dragging her body into the shadow of a split boulder while loose gravel slid beneath her knees. Every inch cost something. Her left side burned with each movement, a deep hot line beneath her vest where the shrapnel had found its way through fabric, armor gap, and skin. Her right shoulder had taken the fall badly. Not broken. She could still move it. Pain gave information. Panic took it away. So Mara did not panic. She listened. Above her, the enemy fighters searched the smoking shelf where she had been. Their boots scraped against stone. One kicked loose brass casings from her old position. Another shouted down the ridge, telling the others she was finished. Mara stayed still. A thread of blood ran from her mouth to her chin. She wiped it away with the back of her glove and checked herself the way she had been trained to check other people. Airway. Breathing. Bleeding. Movement. Weapon. The first 4 were bad but manageable. The 5th was worse. Her rifle was gone. The blast had torn it from the shelf, and the drag bag had fallen somewhere below. Her sidearm remained holstered, but she had only 1 magazine left. Her radio was cracked down the center, the screen dark, the push-to-talk dead under her thumb. No rifle. No comms. No overwatch. No one coming back. For a moment, she allowed herself to look toward the direction the Rangers had gone. Not in anger. Anger was too heavy to carry uphill. She knew why Ward had moved. She knew what the valley looked like from his position. Wounded men, closing fire, no communications, no confirmed sign of life from her shelf. A commander did not get to choose the clean answer. He chose the answer that kept the most people breathing. Still, the words had reached her through the smoke. She's dead. Mara closed her eyes once. Not long. Just enough to put the words somewhere they could not slow her hands. Then a sound cut through the ringing in her ear. A voice. Faint. Not from the wash where Ward had escaped. From the lower ravine behind the relay station. Help! Mara's eyes opened. She turned her head slowly. At first, she heard only wind moving through stone. Then the voice came again, weaker this time, half swallowed by distance and gunfire. Ranger down. We need help. Mara shifted onto one knee, biting down hard enough that her jaw trembled. She crawled to the edge of the boulder and looked through a gap toward the rear side of the valley. The smoke parted in strips. Below the relay station, beyond the drainage ditch, a secondary ravine cut toward the south wall. It was lower than the path Ward had taken and partially hidden by broken concrete from the tower collapse. Mara had marked it earlier as dead ground, too low for clean radio, too narrow for fast movement, but shielded from most ridge fire. Now she saw why the voice had come from there. For Rangers were trapped. not Ward's main group. A separated rear security element. They must have been blown off course by the second explosion, forced into the ravine when the ditch collapsed. From above, Mara could see them in fragments. One man on his back, barely moving. One crouched over him with a bandage pressed to his thigh. One lying near the ravine wall, rifle pointed outward, firing short bursts to keep the enemy back. And one trying to stand with blood running down his face, failing each time his left leg touched the ground. Mara recognized them from the briefing. Mason had been pulled out with Ward. These were the other 4 from the rear element: Torres, Reed, Alvarez, and Private Kellen Price, the quiet communications specialist who had spent the morning checking batteries and avoiding Briggs' jokes. Now they were behind the smoke. Cut off. No one on Ward's side could see them. The enemy could. 2 fighters moved along the upper rocks toward the ravine mouth, keeping low, trying to flank them. A third waited behind a broken wall near the station, watching for any ranger. Desperate enough to crawl out. Mara looked at her pistol. 1 magazine. For trapped men. 3 visible enemies. More above her. Bad math. She breathed through the pain and searched the ground below her shelf. Her eyes caught the torn shape of her drag bag lodged against a thorn bush 20 meters down. The rifle case was empty, but something dark lay half under the canvas. Her spotting scope. No, not useful. Then she saw the sling. Her rifle had fallen farther, caught between 2 rocks near the base of the shelf. The barrel was scarred. The optic was gone. The stock looked cracked. But the action might still cycle. Mara stared at it. 20 meters downhill. Exposed. Enemy above. Enemy below. Bleeding side. Bad shoulder. She almost smiled. Almost. Of course, she whispered. The first fighter above her began climbing down toward the split boulder. Mara heard him before she saw him. Slow steps. Careful now. He was looking for a body. Or a weapon. Or proof. Mara slid deeper into shadow and drew her sidearm. Her hand was slick, so she wiped it against her pant leg and adjusted her grip. The fighter came around the stone with his rifle lowered just enough. Mara moved first. She caught the barrel with her left hand and drove it outward as he fired. The round snapped past her ear and struck rock. She stepped inside the weapon, pressed her pistol against his vest seam, and fired once. The sound was flat and brutal in the tight space. He dropped without a word. Mara took his rifle before he hit the ground. Not because she liked it. Because she needed it. She checked the magazine, cleared the sling from his arm, and pulled back into cover. The weapon was heavier than she wanted, unfamiliar in the small ways that mattered: different trigger, different balance, different sight height. But it fired. That was enough. Below, the trapped rangers were running out of time. Torres, the one treating the man on the ground, looked up when the enemy near the broken wall began moving closer. "Reed," he shouted. "Left side." Reed tried to rotate, but his injured leg buckled. He fired anyway, rounds climbing high and useless into the wall. The enemy fighter raised his weapon. Mara rested. The captured rifle across the rock gap. No perfect sight picture. No time. She aimed through iron and instinct. Her shot struck the wall beside the fighter's head, close enough to blast dust across his face. He ducked hard and rolled back into cover. The rangers below froze. Torres looked up, searching the smoke. He could not see her. No one could. Mara fired again at the rocks near the ravine mouth, stopping the flanking pair long enough for Reed to drag himself behind cover. Then she began moving downhill. Not fast. Fast would open the wound. Fast would make noise. Fast would turn her into a target. She moved like water finding cracks in stone. Down 3 meters. Stop. Listen. Shift left. Down 5 more. Pause as rounds cut above the place she had almost chosen. Breathe. Move. Her body wanted to quit by the time she reached her fallen rifle. She dropped beside it harder than she intended, a sharp sound escaping her throat before she could stop it. She waited for the pain to pass from lightning into fire. Then she picked up the weapon. The optic mount was destroyed. The barrel was scratched, but straight enough. The magazine was still seated. She pulled the charging handle. A round ejected cleanly. Another chambered. Mara lowered her forehead briefly against the stock. "Still with me," she murmured. The rifle felt damaged, but familiar. Like an old friend who had survived the same fall. She tore the broken optic free and kept the rifle low as she crawled toward the lower ravine. A shout rose behind her. The men above had found the body she left in the rocks. They knew now. She was not dead. Mara slid the last few meters down a gravel chute and dropped behind the ravine wall near Torres. He spun toward her, rifle half-raised, eyes wild. Then he recognized her. His mouth fell open. "Chief." Mara pressed a finger to her lips and looked over the four rangers. Alvarez was unconscious on the ground, breathing but pale, one leg bleeding through a field dressing. Price had a deep cut along his scalp and one arm hanging uselessly. Reed's ankle was twisted wrong, swollen hard against his boot. Torres was the only one still mostly mobile, but his hands were shaking from blood loss or shock. Mara absorbed all of it in 2 seconds. Then she said, "Who can walk?" Nobody answered. That was answer enough. Torres stared at the blood down her side. "Chief, you're hit." Mara pulled a tourniquet from her kit and tossed it to him. "So are you." He blinked. She pointed at Alvarez. "Tighten his leg. Check his airway. Reed, cover the ravine mouth. Price, stay awake. If you close your eyes, I'll be annoyed." Price gave a weak, confused laugh. It was small, but it was life. Above them, enemy voices grew louder. Torres tightened the tourniquet until Alvarez groaned back into consciousness. Mara leaned over him. "Ranger, look at me." Alvarez's eyes fluttered. "Can you hear me?" He nodded faintly. "Good. I'm Mara. You're not dying in this ditch." His lips moved. "Thought you were dead." Mara checked the ridge, then looked back at him. So did everyone else. Reed fired twice from the ravine mouth. "Chief, they're closing." Mara took one breath, then another. The extraction route Ward used was gone to them. The upper ridge was crawling with enemy. The road was mined. The station was compromised. There was only one way out. South through the ravine, under the rock shelf, then across the old goat trail that curved back toward the base's outer patrol road. Bad terrain. Long distance. Wounded men. No radio. Night coming. Mara looked at the four rangers. For men who could not all walk. For lives the valley had decided to keep. She slung her damaged rifle across her chest and tightened the strap until it bit into her shoulder. "Listen carefully," she said. "We move in 30 seconds. No one gets left behind. No one makes noise unless they're dying, and even then, try to be polite about it." Torres stared at her like she had just ordered the mountain to step aside. "How are we moving Alvarez?" Mara looked at the unconscious ranger, then at the torn antenna canvas beside the ravine wall. "We drag him until we can carry him." "And Reed?" "I'll take Reed." Reed looked at her injured side. "Chief, I'm bigger than you." Mara's eyes shifted to him. For the first time all day, something like a cold smile touched her face. "Then try to be lighter." "The enemy," shouted from above. A shadow crossed the ravine mouth. Mara raised her rifle and fired without looking away from Reed. The shadow vanished. She reached down, grabbed Reed by the front of his vest, and pulled him upright with a strength that made Torres stop breathing for a second. Pain flashed white behind her eyes. She ignored it. "Move," Mara said. And the four rangers moved. The ravine did not give them a path. It gave them a test. Mara moved first with Reed's arm hooked over her shoulder and his weight dragging hard against her injured side. Every step sent pain through her ribs, down into her hip, and back up behind her eyes. She did not let it change her pace. Behind her, Torres pulled Alvarez on a torn sheet of antenna canvas, using 2 lengths of cable as handles. Price stumbled behind them with one arm tucked against his chest, his face pale beneath the dust, his good hand gripping Torres' vest whenever the ground tilted. No one looked like a rescue team. They looked like what survived after the rescue failed. The ravine bent south between 2 walls of stone, narrow enough in places that Reed's boot scraped one side while Mara's shoulder brushed the other. Above them, the enemy searched the ridge, shouting to each other, angry now. They had found no body. They had found the dead fighter. They had found the empty space where Mara should have been. That meant they would start thinking. Mara hated when the enemy started thinking. She stopped at a bend and lowered Reed against the wall. Down. Everyone dropped. Torres was breathing too hard. What is it? Mara raised one hand. Silence. At first, there was only wind. Then came the sound she had been waiting for. Small stones rolling. Not from above. Ahead. Someone had moved into the ravine mouth. Mara crouched low and peered around the bend. 20 meters forward, 2 fighters were working their way down from the broken slope, trying to cut off the southern exit. They were moving carefully, rifles ready, using the rock walls the way trained men did. They had guessed her route. Not good. Reed saw the direction of her eyes and tightened his jaw. Chief, leave me here with a rifle. I can slow them down. No, Chief, no, her voice did not rise. It did not need to. Reed looked away, ashamed of needing help more than afraid of dying. Mara understood that kind of shame. She had seen it in strong men when their legs failed. She had seen it in wounded pilots pulled from wreckage. She had seen it in herself the first time an instructor had carried her out of freezing surf after her body stopped obeying orders. So she gave him something better than comfort. A job. Take Price's spare magazine, she said. When I move, you fire 2 rounds into the left wall. Not at them. The wall. Reed blinked. The wall. Loose shale above them. Break it. He understood then. Not a firefight. A decision. Torres whispered, what about us? You drag Alvarez past me when the rocks fall. Price follows. No one stops. Price looked at the narrow opening ahead. And you? Mara checked her damaged rifle. I'll be impolite. She moved before fear could grow roots. Reed fired twice. The rounds cracked into the brittle wall above the fighters. Shale broke loose in a rattling sheet, not enough to bury anyone, but enough to make both men flinch and cover their heads. Mara stepped into the open. Her first shot struck the stone at their feet. Her second punched into the wall beside the lead fighter's shoulder. Not clean shots. Not meant to be. She was hurting them, forcing their bodies into the only pocket of cover that had no angle on the ravine floor. Go, she said. Torres pulled. Alvarez slid over rock, groaning through clenched teeth. Price stumbled after him. Reed pushed himself up and half-hopped, half fell into Mara's reach. She caught him with her bad arm and nearly went to one knee. Nearly. The fighters recovered and fired blind around the rock pocket. Rounds snapped overhead, close enough to dust the ravine wall. Mara shoved Reed forward and turned back. One shot. The ravine answered with silence. Then they moved again. For the next hour, the mountain took pieces from them. It took Torres' strength first. His steps shortened. His shoulders shook from dragging Alvarez over uneven ground. Mara saw it and shifted the load without discussion. She tore another length of cable from the canvas, looped it across her own chest, and took half the drag weight while still supporting Reed. Torres stared at her. Chief, you can't carry both. Mara leaned forward and began pulling. Watch me. It took Price's courage next. Halfway through the ravine, he stopped near a narrow drop where the trail fell 3 feet into a dry basin. His breathing turned sharp. His eyes fixed on nothing. Shock was catching him, slow and cold. Mara lowered Reed, stepped close to Price, and placed her hand on the side of his helmet. Look at me. He tried. His pupils trembled. I can't, he whispered. I can't feel my arm. I can't. Yes, you can. I'm slowing you down. You're walking, Mara said. That means you're useful. Price swallowed. She pointed down the trail. Count 10 steps. Not the whole mountain. 10 steps. He nodded once. Then again. 10 steps, he repeated. Good. They kept moving. The mountain took Mara's blood last. She felt it as the heat in her side turned heavy and distant. Her fingers were colder now. The rifle seemed heavier. Reed's weight pressed into her shoulder like wet sand. Every time she blinked, the world stayed dark a fraction too long. She adjusted by speaking less. Saving breath. Saving focus. At the mouth of the South Ravine, they found the old goat trail. It curved along the slope toward the patrol road, a pale scratch across the stone. Beyond it, Far in the distance, Mara could see the faint outline of the base perimeter tower. Too far. Still possible. Behind them, voices echoed again. More men entering the ravine. Torres heard them and cursed under his breath. They're still coming. Mara looked at the four rangers. Alvarez barely conscious. Reed unable to walk alone. Price holding himself together by counting. Torres almost spent. She had one magazine in the damaged rifle, maybe half full. A pistol with little left. No working radio. No easy terrain. No room for mistakes. So she changed the rules. She looked at Torres. Give me your smoke. He pulled a dented canister from his vest and handed it over. Mara studied the slope below the goat trail. Loose dust. Dry brush. Crosswind pushing east. Good enough. She ignited the smoke and rolled it downhill. The canister bounced twice, then began pouring a thick gray cloud across the lower slope. The wind grabbed it and stretched it behind them like a curtain. Move inside the smoke line, she said. We'll lose visibility, Torres said. So will they. They moved through gray light and grit. 10 steps. Then 10 more. Then 10 more. Mara stopped counting distance and counted sounds instead. Reed's breathing. Torres' boots. Price whispering numbers. Alvarez groaning when the canvas hit stones. Enemy voices fading, then rising, then fading again behind the smoke. At one point, Price slipped. Mara caught him by the back of his vest without letting Reed fall. At another, Torres dropped to one knee. Mara took the drag line fully and pulled until he could stand again. Near the final bend, Reed looked at her through sweat and dust. Chief, he said quietly, why are you doing this? Mara did not look at him. The patrol road was closer now. The base tower still distant, but real. Because you're breathing, she said. Reed's face tightened. That answer did something to him. It took the shame from his eyes and replaced it with something steadier. Behind them, a rifle cracked through the smoke. A round struck the rock above Mara's head. She turned, raised her damaged rifle, and fired once into the gray. No target. Just a warning. The pursuit slowed. That was all she needed. By the time they reached the old patrol road, the sun had begun to lower behind the ridgeline. The air was colder. The valley behind them was a wall of smoke and fading gunfire. Ahead, the road curved toward the outer service gate of the base, still miles away. Torres looked at the distance and laughed once, empty and broken. We're not going to make that. Mara shifted Reed higher on her shoulder. Her legs trembled. Her side burned. Her vision narrowed at the edges. But her voice stayed calm. Yes, she said. We are. Alvarez stirred on the canvas, barely awake. Chief. Mara looked down. He tried to focus on her. Did they leave us? The question hung in the cold air. Mara thought of Ward's broken voice. Briggs staring up at the burning ridge. The words through smoke. She's dead. Then she looked at the four rangers still alive because she had refused to agree with that sentence. They made a call, she said. Now we make it wrong. She tightened the cable across her chest. Then Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss started walking toward home, carrying one ranger on her shoulder, dragging another behind her and leading two more through the smoke. By the time the base perimeter came into view, Mara could no longer feel her left hand. That concerned her more than the blood. Blood had rules. Pressure slowed it. Cloth absorbed it. A tourniquet stopped it if the wound was in the right place. Numbness was different. Numbness meant the body had started making decisions without permission. She tightened her grip on Reed's vest anyway. The ranger hung against her shoulder, one arm locked around the back of her neck, his injured ankle dragging whenever his focus slipped. Every few steps, he tried to take more of his own weight. Every few steps, his leg failed and Mara absorbed the fall through her wounded side. Behind them, Torres pulled Alvarez across the dirt road on the torn antenna canvas. The cable handles had carved red lines into his gloves. His breath came in hard bursts now, each one rougher than the last. Price walked beside him, half-dazed, one arm useless, his lips still moving around the same quiet count. 7, 8, 9, 10. Then again. 1, 2, 3. The The base tower shimmered in the distance through heat, dust, and the last gold of the afternoon. Close enough to see. Too far to trust. Mara stopped beside a broken culvert and lowered Reed to the ground. He bit down on a cry as his ankle shifted beneath him. Sorry, she said. Reed shook his head. Don't apologize to me. Mara did not answer. She turned toward the road behind them. For several seconds, there was nothing. Just the empty stretch of dirt cutting back toward the valley, the smoke rising beyond the ridges, and the cold wind beginning to move down from the high ground. Then she saw it. A dust line. Small. Moving fast. Enemy pursuit. Torres saw her face and followed her gaze. How many? Mara watched the dust split into shapes. 3, maybe 4. Light vehicle. Price. Stopped counting. Reed reached for his rifle, but his hands shook so badly he almost dropped it. Mara crouched beside him. Not yet. They catch us out here, we're done, Reed said. No, Mara replied. They catch us standing still, we're done. She looked at the culvert. Old concrete. Half collapsed. Wide enough for one man to crawl through. Running beneath the road toward a shallow drainage channel on the other side. Not cover for all of them. Not safety. But cover was not always a place. Sometimes cover was an idea the enemy accepted too quickly. Mara pointed to the culvert. Alvarez inside. Price with him. Torres, you take Reed through to the far side. Torres stared at her. And you? I slow them. No, the word came out before he could stop it. Mara looked at him. Torres was not challenging her. Not really. His eyes were wet with exhaustion and fear and something close to anger, but it was not the kind Briggs had carried that morning. This anger came from being saved so many times that he could no longer pretend the cost was invisible. Chief, he said, voice cracking, you have carried us for miles. Mara checked the damaged rifle and counted what remained by weight and memory. Then don't waste it. Reed grabbed her sleeve. Mara. It was the first time any of them had used her name. Not Chief. Not Overwatch. Mara. She looked down at him. Reed swallowed. Come through after us. The dust line grew louder behind them. Mara gave him the only promise she could keep. Move. Torres understood then. He hated it, but he understood. He dragged Alvarez toward the culvert while Price crawled in after him, pushing with one arm and both knees. Reed forced himself up and half-hopped to the opening, then turned back one last time. Mara had already moved to the road. She stood in the open for 2 seconds. Long enough to be seen. Then she dropped behind the broken edge of the culvert, pressed the rifle into her shoulder, and waited. The enemy vehicle came around the bend too fast. A small pickup, dust-covered, with 2 men in the cab and 2 in the back. They had followed the blood trail. The drag marks. The footprints. The proof that the dead woman was not dead and that the rangers they thought trapped had somehow crossed the mountain. The driver saw Mara's shape near the road and accelerated. That was his mistake. Mara fired into the dirt in front of the front tire. The round kicked up a hard burst of dust and stone. The driver flinched, overcorrected, and the pickup swerved sideways. The rear fishtailed toward the ditch. One fighter in the back lost his balance and fell against the rail. Mara fired again. Not at the men. At the tire. The front end dropped with a violent snap, and the vehicle skidded to a stop 30 meters away. The men spilled out shouting. Mara rolled behind the culvert as rounds cracked over her position. Concrete chips stung her cheek. Dust filled her mouth. Her rifle clicked empty on the next trigger pull. She looked at it. Then set it down carefully, almost gently. Thank you, she whispered. She drew her pistol. Behind her, Torres had gotten Reed through the culvert. Price and Alvarez were on the far side. They were moving again, slower now, but moving. Good. Mara waited until the first fighter came close enough that she could hear his breathing. Then she fired once. He fell behind the road berm. The others stopped advancing. They had expected wounded prey. They had found a cornered professional. That bought her another 10 seconds. Maybe 15. From the base tower, a guard had seen the disabled pickup. At first, Private Daniel Mercer thought it was another patrol vehicle returning damaged from the outer road. Then he lifted his binoculars and saw the smoke, the strange angle of the truck, and a figure crouched near the culvert with a pistol in one hand. He reached for the radio. "Tower 3 to command. I have movement on South Service Road. Possible contact outside the wire." The reply came back distracted. The base was still dealing with the broken return of Ward's team. Wounded Rangers had been rushed to medical. Debriefs had started. A casualty report was being prepared for Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss. The woman everyone believed was dead. Mercer tightened the focus on his binoculars. Another figure emerged from the drainage channel. Then another. One dragging someone. One crawling. One leaning against the first. Mercer stopped breathing. "Command," he said, louder now, "I have friendly wounded outside the South Road. Multiple friendly wounded. They are not on the convoy manifest." Inside the Tactical Operations Center, Captain Ward stood with one hand braced against a table, dust still in his hair, a field dressing wrapped around his forearm. Briggs sat nearby, silent, staring at the floor. Holt had refused to go to medical until someone confirmed whether Mara had been recovered. No one had confirmed it, because no one had gone back. The radio operator turned sharply. "Say again, Tower 3? Mercer's voice shook. "I count 4 wounded. Wait 5. There's someone behind them." Ward looked up. Briggs stood. The room seemed to lose air. Mercer adjusted his binoculars again. Through the wavering heat, he saw a woman step out from behind the culvert. She was limping. Her uniform was torn dark along one side. A pistol hung low in her right hand. With her left arm, she grabbed Reed from where he had stumbled and pulled him upright again. Torres was dragging Alvarez. Price leaned into her shoulder for 2 steps before she shoved him gently forward. She was not walking like someone who had won. She was walking like someone who had refused to stop losing until everyone else was safe. Mercer lowered the binoculars, then raised them again, as if the truth might vanish if he blinked. "Command," he said, voice almost a whisper. "It's Chief Voss." No one in the operations center moved. Ward's face went pale. Briggs whispered no, but it was not denial. It was disbelief. Mercer kept speaking as the scene unfolded in his lenses. "She's alive. She's carrying one ranger. Correction, supporting one, dragging another by harness line. 2 more walking wounded with her. Enemy contact behind them. Request immediate response." The room exploded into motion. Ward grabbed his rifle from the wall. "Quick reaction team, Southgate now." Briggs was already moving. Holt followed despite the medic shouting after him. Outside, alarms cut across the base. The south gate opened with a metallic groan, and a response vehicle tore down the service road, dust rising behind it. Medics ran with stretchers. Security teams spread along the wire. The tower gunner fired warning bursts toward the disabled enemy pickup, forcing the remaining fighters back into the dust. Mara heard the engines before she saw the gate open. For the first time in miles, she let herself believe the road had an end. Reed sagged against her. "Chief," he murmured, "is that us?" Mara blinked hard to clear the blur from her vision. "Yes," she said. "That's us." Torres fell to one knee beside Alvarez, still gripping the cable handles as if letting go might undo everything. Price stood swaying in the road, counting under his breath but no longer making numbers. The response vehicle stopped 20 meters away. Medics rushed forward. Ward got out first. He saw Torres. He saw Price. He saw Alvarez on the canvas. He saw Reed leaning into Mara. Then he saw her face. For a moment, Captain Elias Ward looked like a man standing before a ghost he had personally buried. "Mara," he said. She tried to answer, but her knees finally bent. Briggs reached her before she hit the ground. The same man who had laughed at her gear. The same man who had called her extra. The same man who had said she was dead because it was easier than hoping she was still fighting. He caught her under the arms and lowered her carefully onto the road. His hands were shaking. Mara looked up at him through dust and blood. Briggs could not speak. Not at first. Behind him, the 4 rangers she had carried out were being loaded onto stretchers. Alive. All of them alive. Mara's eyes moved to Ward. 4, she said. Ward crouched beside her, not understanding. Her voice was barely there. "You left for." The words struck harder than blame because they were not spoken with anger. Only fact. Ward's eyes filled with pain. "I know." Mara took one slow breath. "I brought them back." Briggs bowed his head. Around them, the road had gone quiet except for medics calling vitals and engines idling in dust. Soldiers gathered near the gate, staring at the woman they had already written into a casualty report. Mara looked at Briggs again. A faint, exhausted edge touched her voice. "Next time," she whispered, "check the pulse." Then her eyes closed, and the entire South Road fell silent. The casualty report had already been written. Not signed. Not filed. But written. Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss, attached Overwatch element, presumed killed during enemy contact on the Western Ridge. Presumed. That word sat in the middle of the page like a failure dressed as procedure. Captain Elias Ward stood in the medical corridor with the report folded once in his hand. The paper had gone soft where his thumb pressed against it. He had read the sentence 5 times and hated it more with each reading. Outside the trauma room, Rangers sat in silence along the wall. No one joked. No one talked about angles, drones, or what should have happened. There was only the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant roll of equipment carts, and the occasional voice of a medic calling for supplies behind closed doors. Ward looked at Briggs. The sergeant sat on a bench with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Dust still clung to his uniform. Mara's blood marked one sleeve where he had caught her on the road. He had not washed it off. Holt stood near the doorway, refusing to sit. Every few minutes, his eyes moved to the trauma room doors, then to the floor, then back again. He had been ordered twice to get his head wound cleaned. Twice he had ignored it. Torres was inside. Reed was inside. Alvarez and Price too. Alive. Because a dead woman had refused to stay dead long enough for paperwork to become truth. The doors opened. A medic stepped out, mask hanging loose around his neck. Everyone stood. The medic looked at Ward first. "All 4 Rangers are stable," he said. Alvarez lost a lot of blood, but the tourniquet saved him. Reed's ankle is ugly, not life-threatening. Price has a fracture and concussion. Torres is exhausted, dehydrated, minor shrapnel. They'll live. A breath moved through the corridor. Not relief exactly. Relief was too clean a word for what passed over their faces. This was something heavier. The body realizing it had been holding grief in advance and could finally set part of it down. Ward nodded. And Chief Voss. The medic's expression changed. That was enough to make the corridor still again. "She's in surgery," he said. "Shrapnel wound to the left side. Severe blood loss. Shoulder trauma. Possible internal damage." She made the walk on willpower and bad manners. No one laughed. The medic's eyes moved over the Rangers. Whoever packed her field kit knew what they were doing. Whoever tightened Alvarez's tourniquet knew what they were doing. Whoever kept those men moving. He stopped for a moment, choosing the professional version of awe. That person should not have been physically capable of doing it. Briggs lowered his head. Ward looked through the small window in the trauma room door, though the curtain blocked his view. "She was capable," Ward said quietly. "We just didn't know how much." The medic left them with that. Hours passed. The base changed around the story. By midnight, every unit had heard some version of it. Most were wrong in the details. Some said she carried all 4 men at once. Some said she fought through an entire enemy squad alone. Some said she walked into the gate without help and asked for coffee. The truth was smaller. And greater. She had bled. She had hurt. She had been afraid, though no one would ever hear her say it. She had made one decision again and again across miles of hostile ground. Not him. Not yet. Not here. By morning, the 4 Rangers she brought back were awake enough to speak. Reed was the first to ask for Ward. The captain entered the recovery room and found him propped against pillows, one leg elevated, face pale but eyes clear. Torres slept in the bed beside him. Alvarez was connected to monitors near the far wall. Price lay under a blanket with his injured arm braced across his chest, whispering numbers in his sleep. Reed looked at Ward for a long moment. Then he said, "She came back for us." Ward nodded. She was hit before she found us. Yes. She had no radio. Yes. No support. Ward's jaw tightened. Yes. Reed looked toward the ceiling. We thought she was dead too, he said. When she dropped into that ravine, I thought I was hallucinating. She looked like she had crawled out of the mountain. Ward pulled a chair beside the bed. Reed continued, voice low. She didn't give a speech. Didn't tell us we were going to be fine. Didn't pretend it was easy. She just started giving orders like the world still had rules. His eyes shifted to Ward. That's why we moved. Because she sounded like the rules still mattered. Ward absorbed that in silence. Across the room, Price opened his eyes. 10 steps, he murmured. Ward looked over. Price blinked slowly. She told me to count 10 steps. I couldn't think past that. His voice cracked. So I counted. All the way home. The room fell quiet. Not empty quiet. The kind that fills with respect because words have become too small. Later that afternoon, Ward found Briggs outside the intensive care wing. The sergeant stood facing a blank wall. His cap was in his hands. Ward stopped beside him. For a while, neither man spoke. Then Briggs said, I heard myself say it. Ward did not ask what. They both knew. She's dead. The words seemed to age him as he repeated them. I saw the blood. The rifle. The blast. I thought. Briggs swallowed. No. That's not true. I didn't think. I decided. I decided because it was easier than believing she was still out there needing us. Ward said nothing. Briggs looked at him then, eyes red from no sleep. I mocked her before we even left the wire. I heard. I questioned every warning. Yes. She saved Holt before the first minute was over. Yes. She saved all of us. Ward's voice was quiet. Yes. Briggs stared at the floor. What do I do with that? Ward looked toward Mara's room. You remember it before your mouth outruns your judgment again. The answer landed without mercy because it was not meant to comfort him. Briggs nodded once. Then he walked to the nurse's station and asked for permission to see her when she woke. Mara woke 26 hours after they brought her in. The first thing she saw was a ceiling tile with a water stain shaped vaguely like Texas. The second thing she saw was Captain Ward asleep in a chair near the wall, arms folded, chin against his chest. The third thing she saw was Sergeant Briggs standing at attention beside the door. That almost made her close her eyes again. Ward woke when she shifted. Mara. His voice carried too much relief and too much guilt. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Ward reached for the water. She took one careful sip through the straw and let her head settle back against the pillow. Four, she asked. Ward leaned forward. Alive. All four. She closed her eyes for a second. That was the only metal she needed in that moment. When she opened them, Briggs was still standing there. Stiff. Pale. Silent. Mara looked at him. You waiting for inspection? His face tightened. No, Chief. Then breathe. You're making the room nervous. Ward looked down to hide the smallest edge of a smile. Briggs took one breath. Then another. He stepped closer to the bed, stopped at a respectful distance, and held his cap in both hands. Chief Voss, he said. I owe you an apology. Mara watched him without expression. Briggs' voice shook, but he did not look away. I judged you before the mission. I questioned your calls. I treated your warning like a weakness because it came from someone I thought I had already measured. He swallowed. Then I left that belly breathing because you saw what I didn't. Holt is alive because of you. Mason made it out because of you. 4 Rangers are alive because of you. And I said you were dead while you were still fighting. The room stayed still. Briggs lowered his eyes. I'm sorry. Mara studied him for a long moment. She could have made it hurt. She had earned that right. Instead, she turned her head slightly toward the window, where morning light cut a pale line across the floor. An apology is a start, she said. Not a finish. Briggs nodded. Yes, Chief. Next time a woman gives you a warning, don't waste the first 30 seconds deciding whether her voice deserves to be heard. His jaw flexed. Yes, Chief. And next time you call someone dead, she added, eyes returning to his, check the pulse. Briggs stood straighter. Yes, Chief. Ward watched the exchange and understood something he should have understood before the valley. Mara did not want worship. She did not want speeches. She did not want men to replace disrespect with myth and call it growth. She wanted standards. The same standard for every voice that had earned the right to speak. The same attention to confidence, whether it came from a man built like Briggs or a woman who could disappear into silence and carry 4 lives out of fire. 3 days later, the base commander held a formation outside the medical wing. Mara hated it. Ward knew she hated it. That was why he kept it brief. Alpha Team stood in front, uniforms clean now, faces not quite able to hide what the valley had changed. Holt wore a small bandage over his eyebrow. Reed leaned on crutches. Torres stood with one arm in a sling. Price stood beside Alvarez and counted nothing at all. Briggs stood at the end of the line. When Mara was wheeled out against her clear objections, the formation snapped to attention so sharply the sound echoed off the building. She looked at Ward. This is unnecessary. Ward leaned down. Completely. Then why am I here? Because some lessons need witnesses. The base commander read the official language. Gallantry. Extraordinary courage. Disregard for personal safety. For lives preserved under hostile conditions. Mara listened with the expression of someone hearing a weather report. But the men in front of her listened differently. They heard the spaces between the words. The crawl through rock. The blood in the dust. The order to move. The 10 steps. The road. The pulse. When the commander finished, he stepped back. Ward moved forward. He did not salute first. Not because she lacked rank. Because this was not about rank. He removed the folded casualty report from his pocket, the one that had called her presumed killed, and tore it in half. Then he saluted. Every ranger followed. Briggs was the last by a fraction of a second. Not because he hesitated. Because his hands were shaking. Mara looked across the line of men who had once doubted her, dismissed her, and then been saved by the very discipline they had failed to respect. She returned the salute. No speech. No dramatic forgiveness. Just a soldier acknowledging soldiers. Later, when the story spread beyond the base, people tried to make it cleaner than it was. They called her fearless. She was not. They called her unstoppable. She had nearly stopped 100 times. They called it a miracle. Mara would have called it training, pain tolerance, field medicine, terrain reading, stubbornness, and 4 men who kept moving when told. But the Rangers of Alpha Team remembered it differently. They remembered a woman everyone underestimated. A sniper they abandoned because the smoke told an easy lie. A voice in a ravine that said no one gets left behind. And the moment she came out of the dust carrying their brothers home. After that day, when Chief Petty Officer Mara Voss entered a room, no one measured her height. No one weighed her silence. No one wondered whether she belonged. They simply stood a little straighter. Because respect was not demanded that day. It was earned on broken stone, paid for in blood, and carried back through the South Gate one ranger at a time.